The first thing you should know is this. I hated him. Not the man we were burying, no, that was complicated. I hated the guy standing next to me, the one who wouldn't even meet my eyes while the priest droned on. It was a small funeral, tucked away in a quiet Massachusetts cemetery where the trees bent low like they, too, were mourning. The late September air was sharp enough to sting, and every inhale burned like the truth I was trying to swallow. Everyone thought we were both grieving the same way. They had no idea. His name was Daniel Hayes, and he was the ex-boyfriend of the man I'd loved in silence for years. The man lying 6 feet below us, Adam, had been both our undoing and our anchor. And now, with Adam gone, Daniel and I were left orbiting the same pain, forced into the same cruel gravity. I didn't cry during the service. I refused. Tears felt like surrender, and I'd promised myself never to let Adam see me broken even in death. Daniel, on the other hand, was trembling, his hands shoved deep into his pockets like he could hold himself together by sheer force. After everyone else drifted away, offering hollow condolences, only the two of us remained by the grave. Silence stretched between us, thick, hostile, unbearable. "Do you ever think he knew?" Daniel asked suddenly, his voice cracked. Raw. I stiffened. "Knew what?" "That you loved him." The words hit like a punch. I turned, finally looking at him. His eyes were red, rimmed with grief and maybe something more dangerous, recognition. He knew. And for the first time, I realized just how much Adam must have told him. Grief is supposed to divide, to keep people in their corners. But ours became tangled, messy, unavoidable. The following days blurred into one long ache. Mornings felt heavier, nights impossible. I saw Daniel everywhere at Adam's parents' house, bringing food, sitting through awkward silences, carrying the same invisible weight I did. Each time I wanted to hate him, but each time I saw pieces of myself reflected back. There's an intimacy in grief no one tells you about. When you mourn the same person, you share something no one else can understand. And against all odds, that intimacy pulled us closer. The first time we really touched was accidental. It was late, and I was sitting on Adam's porch steps, clutching a beer that had gone warm hours ago. Daniel sat down beside me without asking. The silence wasn't hostile this time. It was heavy, almost comfortable. When he reached over, his hand brushed mine. Just a brush, fleeting and uncertain, but it lit through me like fire against the cold night air. I should have pulled away. Instead, I stayed. "Why do I feel like I lost him twice?" Daniel whispered, eyes fixed on the streetlight. My chest clenched. "Because you did, and so did I." And then, for the first time since Adam's death, we weren't two enemies. We were two men who had lost the same universe. Grief turned into something else after that. We started meeting without planning, at the diner Adam used to love, at the park where he used to run, at the bookstore where he always bought secondhand poetry. Each place hurt. Each place also stitched us together, thread by fragile thread. It was dangerous, this closeness. People talked. Adam's sister gave me looks sharp enough to cut, as if she suspected what was happening. As if falling in love with the man who had loved your love was betrayal. Maybe it was. But grief doesn't follow rules. Love never did either. One night, a storm rolled in. Daniel showed up at my apartment, drenched, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wild with something I couldn't name. "I can't be alone tonight," he said, voice barely audible over the thunder. So I let him in. We sat on my couch, soaked clothes clinging to our skin, shivering. The electricity flickered out, leaving only candlelight between us. The tension was unbearable. His knee brushed mine once, twice, and then he didn't move away. "You hate me," he whispered. "I want to," I admitted. And then he kissed me. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, messy, almost angry. But beneath it was something softer, fragile, waiting to be acknowledged. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one inside me. "We can't do this," Daniel said, even as his hand lingered on my jaw. "No," I agreed. "But we already are." That night changed everything. We didn't become lovers right away. We became something stranger, two men teetering on the edge of collapse, holding each other up in the only way we knew how. We shared stories about Adam, laughed through tears, argued about the smallest details of his life like it mattered, like remembering him perfectly would bring him back. And slowly, the grief that had been drowning us turned into a bridge. A fragile one, yes, but strong enough to carry us towards something neither of us expected. The morning after, sunlight broke through the blinds like an uninvited truth. Daniel was still there, asleep on my couch, one arm thrown over his face, chest rising and falling with an unfamiliar calm. For a second, I just stared at him. It felt dangerous watching him like that, like if I let myself linger too long, I'd admit something I wasn't ready to say out loud. I made coffee just to keep my hands busy. The sound must have woken him, because soon he sat up, hair a mess, shirt wrinkled, looking far too human for someone I'd sworn to hate. "Morning," he croaked, voice rough. "Morning," I echoed, sliding a mug his way. We didn't talk about the kiss. We didn't talk about how he'd stayed the night. But the silence between us wasn't jagged anymore. It was tender, almost fragile, like if we acknowledged it too soon, it might break. Over the next weeks, we fell into something like routine. It wasn't planned, never spoken of, but it happened anyway. He'd show up at my door after work with takeout, and we'd eat in silence, watching reruns Adam used to love. Sometimes we'd argue about politics, about which beer was better, about whether Adam would have hated the new band we'd found on Spotify. Arguing was easier than admitting what we were really doing, building something out of the ruins of someone else. But at night, when the world quieted, I'd think about that kiss. The way his hand had trembled against my jaw, the way my chest had ached with both betrayal and longing. It haunted me, even more than Adam's absence. One evening, we were at the lake. Adam used to drag us both there during summers, convinced cold water could cure anything. It was late October now, too cold for swimming, but Daniel insisted we go anyway. We sat on the dock, breath clouding in the air, feet dangling above the dark water. "Do you ever wonder if he'd hate us for this?" Daniel asked suddenly. "For what?" I played dumb, but my stomach twisted. "For being here, together, without him." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, all the time." Daniel let out a hollow laugh. "He'd probably call us idiots." I managed to smile. "That sounds like him." Our eyes met then, and it was unbearable how much truth sat between us. He reached for my hand, hesitated, then finally laced his fingers with mine. I didn't pull away. The lake reflected the moonlight, silver and restless, and for the first time, holding his hand didn't feel like betrayal. Felt like survival. Of course, the world doesn't let you grieve quietly forever. Adam's mother called me one Sunday, her voice gentle but pointed. "I heard you've been spending a lot of time with Daniel." I froze, phone pressed too tight against my ear. "Yeah, he's grieving too." There was a pause. Then she sighed, the kind of sigh that carried both pain and resignation. "Just be careful, sweetheart. People talk." I wanted to scream that I didn't care, that no one else understood what it meant to lose Adam, that Daniel was the only one who made the silence bearable. But instead I just mumbled something polite and hung up. That night I told Daniel about it. He laughed, bitter and sharp. "Of course people talk. They always do." I looked at him. "Does it bother you?" He hesitated. "Only if it bothers you." I didn't answer, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. It did bother me, not because of what they thought, but because it meant what we had was real enough to notice. The first time we slept together wasn't planned. We'd been drinking, sitting too close on my couch, laughter spilling over into something heavier. His knee pressed against mine, then his hand, then suddenly we were kissing again, hotter this time, needier, like all the walls we'd built had finally cracked. When we stumbled into my bedroom, it wasn't about lust alone. It was about grief, about love, about the desperate need to feel alive again. His mouth was rough against mine, but his hands were gentle, reverent, like he was afraid I might disappear if he wasn't careful. Afterward, we lay tangled in sheets, hearts racing, the silence so loud it hurt. "This is wrong," Daniel whispered. "Yeah," I agreed, but neither of us moved. And just like that, wrong became the only thing that felt right. The days after were complicated. Some mornings he'd leave before the sun rose, like sneaking out made it less real. Other mornings he'd stay, making pancakes in my kitchen while humming some tune Adam used to love. We never defined what we were. We didn't dare. But the more time we spent together, the more the guilt shifted into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe acceptance. One night, as we lay in bed, Daniel traced circles on my arm, his voice quiet. "You know, Adam used to talk about you." My chest tightened. "What did he say?" "That you were the only one who really got him. That no matter what, he knew you'd always be there." I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. "And yet, he chose you." Daniel's hand stilled. "Yeah, he did." There was no bitterness in his voice, just truth. And somehow, that truth made me want to hold him tighter. We couldn't hide forever. At Thanksgiving, Adam's sister invited both of us. Felt like a trap, but refusing wasn't an option. The dinner table was heavy with unspoken tension. People watched us too closely, their eyes sharp, curious. When Daniel passed me the mashed potatoes, our fingers brushed. It was innocent, too innocent, but the look Adam's sister gave me could have cut glass. Later, she cornered me in the kitchen. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed. I froze, plate in hand. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. You and Daniel is sick. He was Adam's. You can't just..." She broke off, voice shaking. I set the plate down carefully. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't told myself the same thing every damn day?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Then stop. Please." I couldn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't want to stop. After that night, Daniel and I tried to pull back. We avoided each other for days, pretending distance would fix everything. But grief is magnetic, and loneliness is ruthless. One cold December evening, he showed up at my door again. No words, just the look in his eyes, raw and desperate. I let him in without hesitation. We didn't talk that night. We just held each other, clinging like the world might split open if we let go. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just surviving with him anymore. I was falling. Love after loss isn't simple. It's jagged, bloody, full of ghosts. Every laugh felt like betrayal, every kiss like a theft. But somewhere between the guilt and the tenderness, something real grew. Daniel wasn't Adam. He never would be. But maybe that was the point. One snowy morning, we walked through the cemetery. The world hushed under white. We stopped at Adam's grave, brushing snow off the headstone. Daniel slipped his gloved hand into mine. "I think he'd want us to be happy," he said softly. For once, I let myself believe it. And for the first time since Adam's death, the weight in my chest felt a little lighter. Winter in Massachusetts has a way of breaking you down. The streets freeze into glass, the sky goes gray for weeks at a time, and the silence of snow makes everything feel lonelier than it already is. That season, loneliness should have swallowed me whole. Instead, it pushed me closer to Daniel. But closeness has consequences. We were walking back from the grocery store one evening, both of us bundled in heavy coats, bags in hand, when someone shouted from across the street, "Guess Adam wasn't enough for you too, huh?" The words hit like a slap. I froze, my heart hammering, while Daniel's jaw clenched tight. A man stood on the corner, cigarette glowing in the dark, smirk curling his lips. I recognized Hyman, old friend of Adam's, someone who'd never liked me much. Daniel dropped his bag, storming forward, but I caught his arm. "Don't," I whispered. The man laughed, cruel and sharp. "Pathetic. Both of you." For a second, I thought Daniel would lunge anyway. His muscles were taut, breath heavy, but finally he pulled back. We walked away in silence, the groceries digging into our fingers. That night, Daniel punched the wall in my apartment, knuckles splitting. "I'm so sick of this," he growled. "Sick of pretending. Sick of acting like what we have is dirty." I wrapped his bleeding hand in a dish towel, heart aching. "It's not dirty," I whispered. Then why does it feel like we're always hiding? I didn't have an answer. The truth was, hiding was killing me. Every time we brushed shoulders in public and had to pretend it meant nothing. Every time I wanted to reach for him and couldn't, it tore another piece off me. But worse than that was the guilt. Adam's ghost followed me everywhere, his voice in my head, his smile in old photos, his absence in every room. Sometimes when I kissed Daniel, I swore I tasted Adam's name on his lips. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself in Adam's old room at his parents' house. His mother kept it exactly the same bed made, books still stacked on the desk, a faint smell of cedar lingering. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching one of his sweaters, and cried for the first time in months. Daniel found me there hours later. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me, his hand covering mine. Do you ever feel like we're stealing him from each other? I asked, voice hoarse. Daniel looked at me, eyes shining with unshed tears. Every damn day. And in that confession, I realized we weren't alone in our guilt. We were drowning together, and somehow that made it bearable. January brought its own storm. Adam's sister confronted me again. This time not in whispers but in fury. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, her face pale with rage. "You're disgusting," she spat. "Sleeping with him? With Daniel? After everything, after Adam?" Her voice cracked, but her anger didn't. "Do you even care about him at all?" I stood frozen in the doorway, Daniel behind me, silent but steady. "You think you're honoring him?" she demanded. "You're spitting on his memory." Daniel stepped forward then, voice steady but sharp. "Stop. You don't get to decide how we grieve." Her eyes filled with tears, fury melting into sorrow. "You loved him, both of you, and now you're—" She shook her head, unable to finish. When she left, slamming the door, the silence she left behind was deafening. Daniel sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Maybe she's right," he muttered. My chest tightened. "No. She's angry, she's grieving, but she's not right." "Then why does it feel like she is?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was pull him into my arms and hope that, somehow, love would be enough to drown out the shame. But love, I was learning, isn't enough on its own. One night we fought. Not just the sharp words we sometimes exchanged, not just the bickering over small things. This was different. We'd been drinking, the television flickering in the background. I'd mentioned Adam's name innocently, I thought, telling a story about a road trip years ago. But Daniel's face went dark. "Do you ever stop comparing me to him?" he snapped. I blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about? You think I don't notice? Every time I touch you, you flinch. Every time I kiss you, you're somewhere else. With him." "That's not true," I said too quickly. "Bullshit." His voice cracked. "You're still in love with him." My throat tightened. "Of course I am. He's dead, Daniel. He's gone. But that doesn't mean what?" He stood, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Doesn't mean you love me? Because God help me, I love you. And I'm tired of pretending I don't." The words hung in the air, heavy, terrifying. I stared at him, heart pounding. "You, what?" His chest rose and fell like he'd just run a marathon. "I love you, and I hate that I do, because it feels like betraying him. But I can't stop. And if you can't say it back, then maybe this," he gestured between us, broken and raw. "Maybe this isn't worth it." Silence swallowed the room. I wanted to say it back. God, I did. But the words caught in my throat, tangled with guilt and fear. So instead, I said nothing. And Daniel walked out. The days after his absence were worse than the months after Adam's death. Grief I knew how to live with. Loneliness, too. But losing Daniel, choosing silence over him, was unbearable. I went through the motions, dragging myself to work, pretending everything was fine. But my apartment felt too empty, my chest too hollow. Every corner of the city reminded me of him: the diner, the bookstore, the cemetery. Even the silence echoed with his voice. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd lost not one man, but two. Weeks passed before I saw him again. It was February. Snow piled high on the sidewalks, when I spotted him outside the library, shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked thinner, paler, like grief had carved deeper lines into him. Our eyes met across the street, and for a moment, time froze. Then he turned and walked away. I should have let him go, but my legs moved on their own, chasing him down the icy sidewalk. "Daniel!" My voice cracked, desperate. He stopped, finally turning. His face was unreadable, eyes guarded. "I'm sorry," I blurted, breath clouding in the cold. "For that night. For everything." His jaw clenched. "Sorry doesn't change the fact that you couldn't say it." I was scared, I admitted, my chest aching. Scared of betraying Adam. Scared of what it meant. But my voice broke. "I don't want to lose you too." Daniel stared at me, silent, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. "Say it," he whispered finally. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out, raw and trembling. "I love you." The moment hung between us, fragile and infinite. Then his expression cracked, and suddenly he was in my arms, his mouth on mine, the kiss tasting of salt and snow and everything we'd both been too afraid to say. That night, when he came home with me again, it felt different. Not desperate, not guilty, but real. When we lay together afterward, his head on my chest, the weight of the world felt lighter. "Do you think he'd forgive us?" Daniel asked softly. I brushed my fingers through his hair, heart steady for the first time in months. "I think he already has." And for the first time, I believed it. Spring crept into Massachusetts slowly, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The snow melted in fits and starts, leaving behind mud and budding grass. But with each warmer day, the air felt lighter, more forgiving. Maybe it wasn't just the season. Maybe it was us. Daniel and I had stopped pretending. No more sneaking out at dawn. No more brushing hands in secret. We were together, and though we hadn't announced it, though whispers still followed us in certain circles, we no longer hid. But acceptance wasn't immediate. Adam's family still eyed me warily, his sister sharp with her silences. Friends avoided looking too closely when we showed up together. And some nights, guilt still crawled into bed with us, whispering Adam's name between the sheets. One evening, we decided to face it head-on. We drove to the cemetery, a basket in the back seat filled with Adam's favorite things: cheap beer, chocolate chip cookies, an old mix CD we'd both found in his car once. The sun was low, spilling gold over the headstones. Daniel set the basket down gently at the grave. I knelt, brushing dirt from the carved letters of Adam's name. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. "Hey man," he said softly, voice trembling just a little. "I don't know if you'd laugh or punch me if you knew, but I think you already do." He let out a shaky breath. "I loved you. God, I did. But I love him now. And I think I hope you'd be okay with that." My chest tightened, but I forced myself to speak. "Adam," I whispered, fingers grazing the cold stone. "You were everything. You know that. And losing you broke me in ways I didn't think I'd survive. But Daniel, he's the reason I did. You connected us even in death. And I think that's the closest thing to a blessing you could give." Silence hung between us, but it wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like the quiet of the world exhaling. We sat there until the sky turned pink, sipping warm beer, telling stories we'd told 100 times before. And for the first time, remembering Adam didn't feel like ripping open a wound. Felt like honoring him. Not long after, Adam's sister called me. Her voice was strained but calmer than before. "Mom says you went to the cemetery. She thought it was nice." I swallowed, uncertain. "Yeah, we did." There was a pause. Then, "I still don't get it. I probably never will. But if it makes you happy, maybe that's enough." It wasn't forgiveness, not fully. But it was something. A door cracked open, however slightly. When I told Daniel later, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "We'll take what we can get." Life didn't suddenly become easy. Grief doesn't vanish, it lingers, reshaping itself into something quieter, less consuming but always there. Some mornings, I'd wake reaching for Adam, only to find Daniel's warm weight beside me. Some days, Daniel would slip into silence, eyes distant, as if haunted by memories only he could see. But we learned to carry it together. We made new traditions: Saturday morning pancakes, walks by the river, reading old poetry books aloud in bed. We built a life not out of forgetting, but out of remembering differently. One night in June, sitting on the fire escape with summer air buzzing around us, Daniel turned to me. "You know," he said, voice thoughtful, "when Adam and I broke up, I thought that was the end of me. I thought no one would ever understand me the way he did. But now," he smiled, small and real, "now I think maybe he was just leading me to you." I reached for his hand, squeezing gently. "Funny, I used to think I loved Adam more than anyone I ever could. But loving you feels different, deeper, like maybe love isn't about who came first, but who stays." He leaned in, kissed me slow and tender. And for once, there was no guilt shadowing it, only light. By autumn, a full year since Adam's death, we returned to the cemetery again. This time, not with tears or shaky confessions, but with quiet smiles and steady hands. We placed fresh flowers on the grave. Daniel slipped a folded note beneath the vase. "What did you write?" I asked. He smirked. "None of your business." I nudged him, laughing softly. "Fair enough." We sat for a while, the crisp air curling around us, leaves falling in fiery colors. "Do you think we'll always come here?" Daniel asked after a while. "Yeah," I said, no hesitation. "Not because we're stuck in the past, but because he's part of who we are. Always will be." Daniel nodded, eyes soft. "I like that." That night, as we lay in bed, I thought about the strange, impossible journey that had led us here. From enemies at a graveside to lovers tangled in grief to something steadier, truer. We hadn't just mourned the same man. We'd survived him. And in surviving, we'd found each other. Grief had been the thread. But love, the messy, complicated, breathtaking love, was what stitched us whole again. Months later, Daniel moved in with me. It wasn't a grand announcement, just boxes stacked in the hallway, a toothbrush in my bathroom, his laugh echoing through rooms that had been too quiet for too long. One evening, as we unpacked the last box, he held up a photo of Adam grinning, sunlit, alive. "Where should this go?" he asked. I took it from him, running my thumb over the frame. "On the shelf," I said, "with the others." And that's where it stayed. Not hidden, not exalted, just there. A reminder of where we'd been and how far we'd come. The following spring, Daniel and I drove across the country. We visited places Adam had loved, but also places we'd never been, places that became ours. We fought sometimes, laughed more often, and held hands across endless highways. One night in Arizona, lying under a sky splattered with stars, Daniel turned to me and whispered, "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that no matter how messy it gets, no matter how many ghosts we carry, we'll keep choosing each other." I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. "I promise." And I meant it. With everything I had left to give, I meant it. Years from now, maybe the world will forget Adam. Maybe the whispers will fade, the judgments dissolve. But we won't forget. He stitched into us, not as a shadow, but as the spark that set everything in motion. And when people ask how Daniel and I found each other, we'll tell the truth. We mourned the same man, and in the ashes of that grief, we discovered that love can bloom even in the unlikeliest soil. That was the end of the story, but not the end of us. Because grief had taught me the hardest truth of all. That love doesn't end when a heart stops beating. Transforms, reshapes, carries us forward. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to hold on, it leads you to a love you never expected. A love that saves you. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.